Hello and welcome back to Economics and You. I am your host, Mr. Samuelson. Today, money supply and the economy. We're going to be looking at how our economy gets more money or less money, depending on what we want to do with it. All right, monetary policy. Let's not forget this stuff. Monetary policy is a primary role of the Federal Reserve System. So what does the Federal Reserve System do? Monetary policy. Who manages monetary policy? The Fed. The Fed uses monetary policy to impact growth, inflation, and employment. Those are the three things that are really impacted by monetary policy, and it's the Fed's job to make sure that these things are all properly balanced. We want a nice balanced economy, and the Fed, well, they're going to take care of that for us. Loose money policy or loose monetary policy is, it's something that's going to add to our money supply. It's going to put more money into the economy. It's kind of like somebody who's loose with their money spends their money easily. This is like the federal government kind of spending its money easily, except for not exactly. It's just creating more money out there to be spent. It's used to increase growth and employment. Okay? So when we put more money into the economy, GDP grows. As GDP is growing and businesses are doing well, more and more people have jobs. Loose monetary policy. It becomes easier to borrow money. This is how the Fed does it. They release this money to the banks, and they tell the banks to loan it out. They tell them to loan at low interest rates. Banks are happy to do so. More money gets into the economy, and spending increases, driving up GDP, providing more jobs. Loose monetary policy. Sounds great, right? Why would we ever not want to have loose monetary policy? It drives growth and jobs. Oh, it also drives inflation, the rise in prices. And it doesn't do anybody any good to be growing if we're going to have inflation, because all that growth will just be fake growth. We want that real GDP to mean something. So we got to make sure we keep inflation low. So we can't make our money policies too loose. Otherwise, we get rising oil prices, food prices, rising prices for everything. No good. So, tight money policy. Yes, it is the reverse of loose. Loose and tight are opposites. So tight monetary policy is going to reduce the money supply. I'm glad you picked up on that one. That was good. Now, tight money, why would we want to use tight money? Well, tight money is used to reduce inflation. If prices are rising, it's because there's too much money in the economy. That's what drives the increase in price, or one of the major factors that drives the increase in price. So if we want to control inflation, we've got to tighten our monetary policy. We got to put less money into the economy. But of course, this is going to have the opposite impact of a loose money policy, and that is it's going to slow our economic growth, and it can increase unemployment. So we do really want to be careful with tight money policy. We want inflation controlled, but when inflation is low, as it is now, a bit of a loose money policy is acceptable. All right. Fractional reserve banking is one of the ways in which the Fed helps to control our money supply. And it's a bit complex, so I'm going to go over it slowly and many times. All right. One tool for... Oh, wait, no, I didn't mean speak slowly. One tool for controlling the money supply is through fractional reserve banking. This is one of the things that the Fed can manipulate in order to control money supply. See, banks have to keep a fraction of all deposits on hand. Okay? They can't loan out every dollar that somebody deposits into them. So if John deposits $1,000 into the bank has to keep some portion of that and not loan it out. In this diagram, we're looking at a fractional reserve of 50%. That is, the bank would have to keep half of it in the bank and loan the other half out. If they loan the other half out to Sue for $500, we now have this system that allows banks to loan. That's their business. And keeps that money supply growing. Because what started as $1,000 is still the $1,000. John has $1,000, it's just in the bank. But now Sue has $500 as well, and our money supply has grown. It's grown from 1,000 to 1,500. So fractional reserve banking allows the Fed to increase our money supply by telling banks you can loan out half of your money. If the reserve requirement increases, that is, if banks have to hold back 80%, then they could only loan out 200, and the money supply would go from 1,000 to 1,200. Increasing the reserve requirement decreases the money supply. All right, let's look at this again. This is the idea of creating new money. A low reserve requirement, dropping it down to 20 or 10%, allows banks to create new money and add to our money supply. Let's walk through this. We have Bank A. Bank A has $1,000 with a 20% reserve requirement. They have to keep 20% in the bank, which means Bank A is going to loan Mr. Jones $800. So they've got 1,000. Now we've got 800 out in the economy. Mr. Jones deposits that money into another bank, Bank B, and Bank B has to hold 20% and loans out the other 640. So we have $1,400 of new money created just through these two transactions in the fractional reserve system. Of course, the loaned out $640 could then be spent and put in another bank account, allowing that other bank to loan out, and it keeps going and going and going, with these numbers getting smaller and smaller, but the real new money supply increasing and increasing. All right, let's look at this again. We have a deposit in a bank. Person right here deposits 1,000. This is a 10% reserve requirement, which is about what the Fed has right now. The bank holds 100, loans 900. This person spends that $900, okay, which goes into somebody else's bank account, right? They earn the money, they put it into their bank. So this person has their 900 in the bank. That bank holds 90 in reserve and loans out 810. So we have 1,700 of new money, with 1,000 being the original. 810 then gets spent. The person who receives it puts it in their bank. Their bank holds a reserve of 81, loans out $729. $729 gets spent to somebody else, etc., 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 ongoing until this dollar amount right here finally hits zero. This creates a tremendous amount of money in the economy because the reserve ratio is so low. This number remains high, and we can loan out that same amount of money over and over and over again. This is called the money multiplier. The fractional reserve requirement has an inverse impact on the money supply, or this formula over here, M equals 1 over the reserve. The money multiplier M is a reciprocal of the reserve requirement. So if we have a rate of 100, okay, if banks have to hold 100% of deposits, we don't increase the money supply at all. M equals 1 over 1. We don't have any addition to the money supply. However, if we have a rate of 50%, we're going to double the money supply. Because the inverse of 1/2 is 2, we are increasing the money supply by 2 by having a 1/2 ratio. If the rate is 20%, we can increase the money supply by 5 and turn $1,000 into $5,000. Like I said, right now we've got a reserve requirement of 10%, which means for every $10,000 of money in the economy, banks can increase that up to $10,000 by loaning it out to other people, who then spend, deposit, and create new loans out of that new deposit. This really allows us to have quite a large impact on our economy, and it also allows the Federal Reserve to change that money supply just by changing this ratio. If we're at 10% and they decide to increase it up to 20%, the money supply in the United States is going to drop by half. That's going to cut inflation, but that's also going to slow growth and cause an increase in unemployment. That is how how monetary policy, one aspect of how monetary policy works within the Federal Reserve. I know that was complex. That's why we hit it many times. I hope You learned something on one of those occasions. Farewell.